everybody forgets, but Coventry was pretty battered after the Second World War. And what people tend to forget is, because history tends to look at things as they are not now and not as they were, there wasn't a lot going on in Coventry during the very early 50s. I mean, it was a pretty desolate place. You know, 58, 59, you started to see, you know, a few groups appear. I mean, albeit nothing like the way that we would look back now. I mean, they were pretty sort of standard groups with a saxophone player and, you know, they still had the suits. Once the Beatles had kicked it off, 61, late 60, call it 62, then it started. And then you had the Co-op Ballroom in Nuneaton. You had the Matrix anyway. There was a gig on the Walsgrave Road above, which became the Lunchbox. There was a hall next door to there. Then the pubs, you know, like the Newlands, the Walsgrave, the Red House, the one by the city, the Mercer's Arms. Mercer's Arms probably was one of the first.
But there were 28 at least venues every night of the week in Coventry. Every pub, every club, without all the majors like the Locarno and the Matrix and the big dance halls. It was a really good scene, and it went on for a long time. It was called the Coventry Twang. Do you remember that?
I mean, we virtually worked 6 days a week.
Yes, we did.
And which is amazing, really. I've still got an old diary, and it's incredible, really, because we were all working. We were all semi-pro, and still working 6 nights a week, and getting up for work in the morning. Sometimes I'd fall asleep at my desk, I must admit.
Mid-70s to mid-80s, really. They were kind of a halcyon sort of time for Coventry and the music scene, I think. And a lot of us got scooped up. There was so much going on in those days. There were some great venues about. And there were a lot of gigs, far more than there are now. I seem to remember there were far more than there are now. I don't know whether that's actually true or not.
There's about 4 punks. When the Fly started, there were about 4 punks in Coventry. And 3 of them were at my wedding. I was 19. With, you know, like with orange hair sort of punks and that kind of stuff. And it was a very straight thing. So it was a little clique of people who used to go around. And it didn't become a scene in Coventry, really, until the Specials. Before that, it was quite just a couple of little places, little punk places where the little group of punks would go to. The bigger clubs are obviously in Birmingham, Barbarella's, Wolverhampton, Lafayette's, places like that, where actually the Lanch took a few bands, and eventually the bigger bands came to places like Locarno. And by the time the Damned and the Stranglers and people like that started playing the Locarno, it kind of got a bit bigger, but certainly from 75, 76, 77 in Coventry, it was very small.
The audiences, when Two Tone started, when the Specials started, well, everything changed after punk, of course, really, which had happened in 1976 and mainly in 77. Up until that point, the audiences in Coventry were much like anywhere else. The main venue for touring bands was the Lanchester Polytechnic, as it was called then, the Student Union Hall, the main hall in the Polytechnic. And everybody used to sit down, as I remember, for bands that played there. Used to sit cross-legged on the floor, often throughout the whole set of a band. But when punk came along, that changed everything. Obviously, it went major shift from progressive rock and all the so-called dinosaurs of the music business as they became known then, the Elton Johns and the Led Zeppelins, etc. Punk changed all that, and everybody started, males especially, started getting up and moving about dance floors a lot more actively than they had before. They had long hair and sat down cross-legged before.
When I first started out, Coventry was great. The venues were great, but they were everywhere. I didn't find Coventry any better than anywhere else. It was good because everywhere was good, mainly because pop music or rock music, whatever you want to call it, was new. So anything new and exciting and fresh, everybody wants it. But I feel that, and I can't put an exact year on it, that it was great up until sometime in the 80s, and like I say, I can't put a date to it, when we lost, within a few years of each other, we lost a couple of the best venues in Coventry, one being Tiffany's, which is now a library.
It was always the thing where you'd go and book the Hope and Anchor, the back room, I don't know if they still do that. That was like, let's do a gig, here's 15 quid for the room. And that's what I did when I was like in my first band, which is called Pretty Poison. And I think we played there as well. I think we did about 4 gigs in Coventry, the Primitives, and one of them would have been the Hope and Anchor really early on, and the Wolf. Scene's a bit more vibrant again. I think when the Primitives started, I don't really remember that much around really.